Automation Face-Off. I am Chris Loder, the moderator / participator / everything else. With me is Andy. Andy is awesome.
Thank you.
Kristoffer.
Yep.
And Hajer. And we're going to tackle some questions. We have an interesting one to start with. If you have one you'd like to share, feel free to write it down and hand it up there, and we'll see what we can do to get to it. We do only have 45 minutes, so we will do our best. And I think this first one here might be interesting. So I will give everybody an opening statement on the first question we get a lot. When it comes to automation frameworks, buy it or build it? Hajer, ladies first.
Yes, so buying or building it? Well, the real question, I think, is the context. What type of project we're working on, right? In my opinion, again, depending on the context of our solution and project, my answer would be it depends, right? I don't see anything else besides, having, looking into the need, right? Talking with your BA, talking with the team, and then from that, looking at the pros and the cons of both sides. Open source is great because it's free, but it has its downfalls, right? Because you're on your own. You're on your own. The commercial one is great because you're always supported, but there's an upfront cost. So again, my answer is, it depends.
Thank you for being definitive. Very political
I told you,
answer.
I'm boxing.
Kristoffer.
Yeah, this is not going to work, so I'm not going to chicken out with some it depends answer. I'm going to say we're going to need to build it. I'm always going to be in favor of building my test tools. The reason for that is quite simple. If you go with an open source tool or you go with a commercial tool, then by definition, those tools need to be broad, they need to be wide in what they support. They're going to have different customers, they're going to have different context that they need support. Whereas if you build it yourself, you can custom make it for your project specifically. You can make it as tiny as you want to. And the upside of this is you get to, if you hire in-house competence that can build this and maintain it, get control over it, and you can maintain it over time. So I'm a huge proponent of building it yourself. Yeah.
Andy, what do you think?
I'm going to side with it depends, but I'm also going to say certain tools are very hard to build yourselves. It's one thing to pick up an open source tool off the shelf and kind of build a project around that. If you're using, let's say for web testing, Selenium, Cypress, Playwright, doing mobile, Appium, right? So there's a little bit of, okay, it's already given to you, but you still have to kind of build things yourself, and you get the nice thing of customizability. But if you want to do something, let's say like visual testing, to build a good visual comparator can be very, very tough, right? You can do it. It's easy to do it pixel by pixel, but if you want something that's like, oh, it actually shows your button went from here to there, that's not something your team is probably going to build yourselves. So I think it's more of it's not just a binary, you buy everything or you build everything. I think it's a matter of, in your testing strategy, knowing what your team can and should build themselves and knowing when it's worth it to maybe go buy something someone's already made.
Build it. End of story. Build it. Sorry, I'm with Kristoffer on this one. But you are right in that aspect. There are some tools that are very, very hard to build yourself. But in general, yeah, I'm a build it unless you find that one thing that you can't do. In my world, thankfully, I haven't hit one of those yet. But we're not doing, like you said, a whole lot of visual testing. So cool. Well, that went overly well. Too well.
Yeah, but the question is also, quite bigger. Should we automate it?
Yes, that's a great question.
Yes.
We're talking about tools and building ourselves, and it's always a fun discussion. It's very sexy. But should we automate everything? What do you guys think?
No,
Are there
no.
areas you see that we should avoid automating?
I am definitely against automating everything because not everything should be and could be automated. There's always going to be a need for manual testing, and having everything automated is a big no for me. So.
Oh, I agree. I'm the hugest proponent of automation, but I'm the first one to stand up and say I cannot automate what has not been tested.
Correct. Yep.
Right. If it hasn't been tested, it doesn't even come to my guys,
Mm.
right? We won't even look at it until it's been tested.
Correct. Yeah, that's how I see it too.
And there are some things you can't automate. You can't automate the feel, the intuitiveness. I've got some QA guys who they know something's wrong. They're like a shark in the water. They smell the drop of blood and they go and they find it.
Mhm.
Your automation will never find those things.
Chris, if we train a big enough AI model,
Oh, no, not the big.
No. I
Not the
call
big
no
word.
AI talk in here.
All right.
None.
fair enough.
None. If not, I would have just had Chat GPT up here on a computer.
I want to piggyback on what both of y'all said. I kind of see exploratory testing as a prerequisite activity for developing automation.
Yep.
You need to go through and explore what the behaviors are in your app before you can actually sit down and try to write a script to exercise those behaviors.
Yeah, all of my guys, before they automate, the first thing I tell them to do is manually take the test case first. Because you have to understand what it is they're asking you to automate.
Honestly, I don't see it the other way. To me, no, I cannot see it any other way. If you don't start, sorry. Oh, yeah. Remember, hey, here. But no, automation comes after making sure that the script, the test case is stable, and doing it manually is the prerequisite to me. I cannot do it any other way, because if I did not manually test it, there's a chance for it to be flaky or not even stable. I don't want to waste my time automating it and then having issues afterwards with that. So definitely.
I have found more bugs doing my automation than I think my automation itself has ever found.
That is so true. Oh my gosh, that is so true.
Yep.
Especially when the team you're joining hasn't done much testing or automation before, and you have to come in and kind of retroactively add some tests. Oh man, it's brutal.
Tell me a little bit about your more bugs found with your automation.
Well, because I'm a horrible tester and I'm a bit of a moron when it comes to those things. So when you give me a piece of software, I don't know how it works.
Okay.
So I just start doing things how I think they're supposed to go, which is what most of our users do.
Right.
Right? A lot of test plans follow the linear path, right? But for me, I'm going like, okay, I have to automate this. And when I start down and I'm like, well, there's two ways to do it. So I better do it. Well, that second way doesn't work. And that's where I've found a lot of bugs that way. Just
Right.
trying to automate something that was supposedly tested.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, the whole process of doing the automation for me is, a semblance, a hybrid of doing exploratory testing at the same time. I kind of have my mission, what feature or functionality I want to automate, and no one's going to hand me a pre-written manual test script these days. We don't have test designers any longer, and thank God for that. If you worked as a test designer, I loved you, but we don't need that anymore. We do exploratory testing, and part of automating it is exploring the product and finding out what we can do.
Okay. So I have a question actually for all you gentlemen here. Is test automation just a validation type of testing, or is there more to it? I got that question thrown at me one time, and I was like, interesting. What do you guys think?
For the most part, and how it's implemented, sorry, Chris, for jumping in there.
Go ahead.
For the most part, I would say, historically, yes, it's been a validation thing that we've done.
But a validation
However-
of what?
Yeah.
There's the key.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really validate anything other than it tells you that whether or not something has changed. It doesn't tell you if that change is good or bad. So a human has to come in afterwards and tell you whether or not that the test case failed because the button is moved.
Right.
But maybe the button moved was the right thing to do, and now we have to update the automation.
And then this is where we come in with the age-old saying, and probably some of you have heard this. I mean, there is no such thing as a 100% test automation. There just isn't. Because there's always going to be a human being who needs to understand the product, someone who's going to need to write the scripts. And even once we have automated it, there's still going to need to be a human being who goes in and inspects the results. He or she needs to communicate with stakeholders, understand, post bug reports. So this thing about, something being 100% automated is just ludicrous. And it deceives a lot of people higher up.
To that effect, I think one of the big things that automation can offer is the richness of the results and the artifacts of testing. It shouldn't just be a binary pass-fail thing that you get. There should be logs. There should be video recordings. There should be screenshots. There should be capturing other kinds of logs and dumps from what's happening in your systems under test. Even if it's something like doing a visual comparison on snapshots over time. All these things provide information to help you as the tester evaluate what is actually happening in your software, right? I think for so long, test automation has been limited by this idea that it must conform to a binary pass-fail results versus giving more helpful information.
And I'm going to ask another question. Actually, it's not really a question. It's more of emphasizing one point. Test automation is not just looking for, is it passing, is it failing? It's mainly helping the manual testing, or not the manual testing, just testing in general, right? Because let's say my manual testers have to manually create or, populate test data into their software. How can we help there, right? Is that testing? Sure, because I'm helping there with the testing activities. But populating, creating a script that's going to help them, bypassing it, bypassing the whole manual factor, that's also, not a validation. It's just helping with the testing part.
I tell people my job is not to automate, not to test automate. My job is to make other people's life easier.
Bingo.
I
Yeah,
do,
that's how I see
and
it.
we do everything from taking regression off the manual tester's plate. I've automated language merges for our docs team. I've had one member of our docs team require screenshots every time we do a release. She would have to go through the product and get it.
Right.
Well, we've automated going through the product. So
Yep.
Here we go. We automated. So now she doesn't have to, and we put all the images right away for her. So she has them all the time. So we do things like that a lot. I've automated setting up environments for my manual testers. So it's not just test automation.
There you go. Yeah, that was my answer. So
Yeah.
it's not just validation.
No,
There's way more to it.
absolutely.
Okay, so I was right.
Sure. Are we doing this pass fail? Sure. Have we talked that one out? Are we good?
No, I mean, if I just can circle back a little bit, I went out swinging here in the beginning, say that we, fundamentally should build our own stuff. But, when we talk about it more, there are nuances, of course, to this. I mean, one example, a few years ago, when we used to do browser testing, front-end testing, we used to do Selenium or other stuff. And then out of nowhere came Cypress. And it just had all the bells and whistles. It was built by test developers for testers. And you could really see that because it collected all the logs, it did all the screenshots. It just made my debugging of the product so much easier. And there's been quite a few years now if we talk Cypress particularly. So there are other tools, but I think those kind of things, those are the times when you want to adopt something that maybe is pre-built. Not buy it, but
Just for the record, I had all that stuff built before Cypress came along. Just so you know.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that was buy it or build it.
It was.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, it really kind of went down a rabbit hole, but that's cool. It's a great
I
rabbit
bought
hole.
into building it.
That's right, Andy. You have been assimilated. Shall we go with my next question?
Go for
Let's
it.
go.
This one was posed by none other than Julie Gardner, because Julie has the best questions, so you have been warned. Where to go?
And again, just before Chris reads this up here, if you guys
Oh, yes.
are sitting here having any questions, something you're thinking about, write it down, raise your hand, let us have it, okay?
Yes, we can take yours instead of this one.
I have one. So
Yep.
Your question about buy or build it, although you said build it, but what about low code programming that they're doing now? Like, take for example, Hajer. Like, we decided to go down the rabbit hole of build it, but we're spending millions of dollars trying to build it with, recent contractors that we have. I mean, we can't keep up with what they're doing. And a simple misconfiguration, like you scrub the ammo configuration and price the whole product, right? So they're like, oh, we need everything. And we're going downstairs and we're listening to, like Tricentis, and we can do it with, using some AI. And I know you said not to bring it up, but I'm just curious to see what your thoughts are on buy or build it when it comes to low code options where development is, churning out the stuff much quicker.
So for the record, I said it depends. So
So
that
for-
is like a great example. That would be something where I would probably think about, just buying a product already.
Yeah. Also, I would say building it is not free, right?
Big
No,
time.
that's-
You're spending in different areas.
That's what I say in my talk on getting started in automation. I talk about open source or buy it, and one of the things is open source is free, but I'm not. Right? I don't work for free. You don't work for free, so there is a cost. So my automation, not only we're not paying licensing fees to a business, but you're paying for my 10 automation developers every year. So there is that, right? But as for your low code thing, being a build it guy, I struggle with it. But my answer to that is, you know what you need better than anybody else. And if that's the tool that's currently working for you, or you think it will work for you, you should try it.
Yeah.
Everybody here has different pieces of automation. We're all in different stages of it. I've been doing it for 25 years, so mine is where it is because I've been doing it for 25 years. Right? But everybody comes in at it, and everybody's got a little different way of doing things, and everybody's at different stages in their automation, and there's no harm in trying it.
Yeah. What I would also add on to that, in my experience, low code, no code tools help you go from 0 to 1. Build it tools help you go from 1 to N. Because
Yes.
I have seen like teams who, maybe it's, for example, I've talked with an insurance company with a very small quote unquote QA team. None of the folks know how to do programming, but they've got good heads on their shoulders. They want to get into automation. They have like 20 scenarios. They just really need to run every time they release once a month. Okay, so for them, a low code, no code tool is going to be very valuable because they can just pop it in and go, right? If it were a much larger kind of team that really needs to run like thousands of tests a day, I'm not sure a no code, low code tool is going to meet that need. That's where you really need something where you can build it so you can customize it and really get high power out of it.
Yes.
Do you have an automation architect running your thing? Come see me later.
All right.
We have another question? Sorry, I need that a little louder.
Not here. Yeah.
Sorry, do you have thoughts on a platform or tool validation, buying versus building, ease or expense or anything like that?
Platform validation. Buy it or build it.
Could I ask, what do you mean by platform validation in its context?
Like ensuring GMP regulations and things like that, the platform itself does what it does.
Yeah.
Make sure it gets validated.
So you mean you have a strict, stringent list of requirements you really need to make sure are there all the time?
That's a build it to me, because your requirements may not fit inside someone's off-the-shelf box.
Yeah. I would say so as well, that it's a build it unless there is a commercial tool specifically for whatever platform you have. Let's imagine it's a medical device or whatever. Maybe there's something out there that's built specifically for, verifying all that. But
I would say if you want to look at companies and vendors offering those kinds of things, I hate to say this, don't always believe the salespeople. Make sure you get in with some sales engineers or some customer success folks and do a POC just to make sure that you can, if you have that very important checklist, I need this and this and this and this, make sure you do a POC to make sure you can do that and that and that and that. Because it would really stink to sign a contract to find out it doesn't serve your need.
Yeah. Pilot project would be also,
Yeah.
something.
Always do a pilot.
Definitely.
Always do a pilot.
yeah, I can only agree. I mean, just a few years ago, I was working with a big Swedish government agency, and we had a big mobile lab in there because accessibility and testing on mobile devices was very important for us. So we had this old mobile lab, and it worked great. Well, it worked. It fitted our needs.
Great is relative.
Yeah, exactly. And then at one point, they realized that we're going to need to go out and update our solution. So they put out requests for offers from different vendors, and one came in and they blew our socks off. It was a fantastic. This. Can you do this? Yes, we can. Can you do that? Yes, we can. And that agency, they signed the contract, and half a year later, everyone just realized that no, they can't do that. No, we can't access these keys on the key. So doing a proof of concept is absolutely vital.
And if I can add one more thing, it also might be a hybrid approach too, because maybe there's a tool or framework or piece or something out there that can do part of what you need, and you can bring that into your wider solution, right? There's no one trick pony. There's no like one size fits all. It's like you really want to look at what's out there, find all the ingredients to make a well-cooked strategy.
Yeah. For those of you who remember her, the lovely Dot Graham, she taught me a long time ago when you're doing a pilot, and especially if it's going to be a commercial tool, if you can provide them with the thing that you want automated, like assuming you're allowed to let it out the door, have them do that. But when they come to show you that all the things they've automated for you, give them a couple of more tests to see how long it takes them to do it. Because if they spend 10 people for 2 weeks trying to automate your thing, it's not obviously going to be very good for you when you have to go do it. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Dot was very wise. Any other questions? Yeah.
Since we're still talking about building, and you mentioned about Cypress, for open source, what would you recommend? We got Cypress, we got Playwright, we got Selenium.
Does everybody remember?
Can I start by asking you to frame your question a little bit more? What context are we talking about? Are you specifically browser front-end testing, or talking?
I know Cypress does.
Yeah.
Oh, where to begin?
Which tool is the best?
Which tools? That's
Which tool
it's
is
kind
the
of funny.
best?
'Cause that's my third question.
Sure. Can I lead off with
Yeah,
this
you
one?
can start.
Yes, you can.
This is my jam.
Andy, who does every tool under the sun.
That's right. I know all of these. So right now, the big three open source tools for front-end browser testing are Selenium WebDriver, Cypress, and Playwright. There's other honorable mentions. We don't have all the time in the world to go into them, but based on things like package download, based on adoption rate, based on what people are actually talking about and using, those are the big three. These are all three fundamentally different tools. So it's important to know what they do, how they approach the problem of browser automation, and the features that they offer or don't offer to know what you should take. So if we look at Selenium, Selenium is classic, right? Selenium is the OG, the old school,
The granddaddy.
the granddaddy. It was the one that we had for the longest time because there was literally nothing else. There's no other way you could automate the browser. And so Selenium operates on WebDriver protocol, which is a W3C recommendation. All the major browsers are going to conform to that standard. So it's compatible everywhere. And you're testing full on real browsers, right? You're testing Google Chrome. You're testing Apple Safari. You're testing Microsoft Edge. However, Selenium itself is purely a browser automation tool. It's not a test framework. So if you want to use Selenium, you've got to pair it with something like JUnits or Robot Framework. Selenium has bindings in multiple programming languages, so you can kind of pick your poison. I'm going to choose Python if that's me, but I've done Java, I've done C#, I've done
TypeScript.
oh my god, yeah, JavaScript, TypeScript. They also have bindings in Ruby. It seems like Ruby is dying in the test automation space. That's a whole nother conversation. But also, in addition to that, you ought to have a layer on top of Selenium to handle things like weighting, to handle things like interactions. So I strongly recommend using something like the screenplay pattern. In fact, somebody is giving a talk on screenplay pattern later that I recommend.
It's a shameless plug.
It ain't me. So that would be Selenium. Cypress came out around 2017, 2018. And like Chris was saying earlier, they were trying to bring a better developer experience, that you didn't have to build everything yourself, that it would have these nice features like logging and visual display and traceability and all those kinds of things. Cypress works entirely within the browser to perform manipulation. So it is very much a front-end friendly framework at the expense of it's only going to be supported in JavaScript. So that could be a limiting factor. The third one I mentioned is Playwright. Playwright is the newest one. It's the new kid on the block. It's the dark horse. It is so hot right now. Came around like 2020-ish is when they first really started. Playwright uses debug protocols. It is freaky fast, like scary fast. Like you have to literally slow it down when you're developing the automation to make sure the thing is stepping through the browser. It also has bindings in multiple languages. Underneath is Node.js. But you can do it in Python. You can do it in JavaScript, Java, .NET. Playwright is more like Cypress in that it provides that richer developer experience, but in the sense more like Selenium in that it has multi-language support. So that's kind of like an overview of the lay of the land right now.
Yep.
Could you guys repeat the question?
Yep.
Virtual
Yep.
is having trouble
Sure.
hearing you, so when they-
So regarding backend, what tools and frameworks do you use? I'm going to yield.
Couldn't find anything to work for you? Oh, then you're in the wrong room looking for experts. I know these people, and I know me. Sorry, Andy.
It's okay.
Do you guys have a recommendation? Because
Well-
I'm going to be
well,
honest, 90% of what I do is front end.
Yeah,
Correct, same here.
yeah. I mean, first of all, it's going to depend on what is your backend. Is it a Node.js or Django or REST APIs? Okay, so more about REST API testing in that case. Yeah, that's really when I'm starting to wheel into the whole Python, build it yourself. You can easily
There you
scale
go.
up if you want to do performance testing. You can add on Locust to get swarm behavior and start getting that. So if you're talking about the pure REST API, Python, build it yourself. If you want a test runner, there's PyTest. There's look at him.
Andy's
Look at
head
him.
is about
This
to
is not-
explode.
This is not safe for work talk for Andy here. So that would be my recommendation.
He's speaking my love language.
I just built my own. It just
I'm
makes
more of a
REST calls and expects
front end,
things to come back.
so I will not be able to test out.
Sure. So when it comes to doing like API testing, like there's going to be the library that you use to call your APIs, and then you're also going to need a test runner. So these are available in any language. Like Chris was talking about Python, that's cool. So if you're in Python, your recipe is something like PyTest plus requests, done. If you're in C#, you're looking at something like either NUnit or XUnit.net or MSTest or SpecFlow plus something like RestAssured.net or REST Sharp, or I mean, you could even use raw HTTPS clients.
That's what I do.
Yeah, you could. I've used REST Sharp in the past. I think RestAssured.net looks really cool right now. Yeah.
And I mean, just to tack on here to kind of really do a shameless plug here. I mean, if you're going with a language and building your own, your creativity is the only limitation.
Yes.
So one of the things we do in my class is we write our test framework around test runners in Python. And then you see that, oh, there is this other external service like randomuser.me. I can download fresh random test person data. I could serialize that so easily down into a JSON file, have 10,000 persons on a little file. I can read it up like that. And suddenly I have this rich, variety of test data. And there's all kind of different things. So if you go with a language and build it yourself, the possibilities, they're endless. So just make sure that you pick a language that, it's easy and nice to work in, like we say.
And ideally, it's the language that you guys are already using. I was a Java guy till I
Yes.
went to the company I'm at. They were a C# backend. I didn't want to be the only guy there doing Java. So I started doing C#, so I'd at least have help when I needed it. Look at Andy, just chuckling over here.
I want to what Andrew said about source tools for web testing. So we did some proof of concept. We tried Test Cafe, we tried Cypress and Playwright. Those were the 3 tools. We spent 2 sprints working on a proof of concept, and then we saw that Test Cafe was a big no-no. We couldn't even load pages. Some of the pages wouldn't be loaded. Cypress was easy, but we still had the same issues wherein our test environment, some of the pages wouldn't load. So then we moved to Playwright, and Playwright has been very good so far. So it's been, I think, a few months, about 10 months or so since we've been using Playwright, but it has been the best.
So to repeat for the virtual, someone in the audience saying they tried Test Cafe, Cypress, and Playwright, and ultimately they're happiest with Playwright. Cool.
Sorry, ma'am, that's not a question. And do you work for Playwright?
I got some stickers if you want them.
So I'm going to follow up with a question here to Andy. And since you were talking so eloquently about Playwright, and I'm sure there's a lot of people right now in the audience, they may have a bulk of test cases in Cypress built up. They've invested quite some time, and they're thinking, how would you go about if you want to start migrating over to try out Playwright and maybe adopt that? Would you go for a hybrid approach, or would you how would you approach that in a project if a customer asked you?
Sure. So real quick, I would ask, are you sure you want to do that? Is there something wrong
Yes.
with Cypress?
Exactly. What's wrong? Why
What's
did you
wrong
believe-
with Cypress? I mean, if they're like, well, Cypress has blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, so you want to do this. There are actually tools that you can pop in Cypress tests and they poop out Playwright tests.
Interesting.
Yes, more than one.
It's a little scary that
Yeah, I know,
someone
right?
had to take the time to build
I
those
know,
tools.
I know. As far as how you should do that, I would say draw a line in the sand, start
Yes.
doing new stuff, leave the old stuff, and if you really feel the need, migrate over old stuff over time, because you're not getting a whole lot of, you're getting a lot more value with new tests than out of just rewriting old tests that cover the same things. If what's working isn't broken, don't fix it.
That's what we did at the previous company I was at. We came in just to start over because their current automation was not good. And we just left that alone, left it running, and we just started on with the new stuff. And eventually, when we had time, we dragged that forward. But yeah, we just started exactly like Andy said. All new stuff gets done in the new world.
And you guys found the time to do that, actually, eventually move the old?
Eventually, we had to plan for it. Because at some point, then you're running so far into two different worlds that
Yes.
you have to drop one.
So yeah, it did happen to me as well. And when we moved the old stuff, actually, we were doing it in parallel. So the new stuff was being implemented, and by iteration, we would start doing the old stuff as well, trying to integrate it into the new solution.
If I may ask, how long did that take to get over?
I left the company, so I don't know.
So it just kept going and going.
It kept going, yeah.
It's that
so I
painful an experience you had to leave.
Exactly,
know.
you got it.
I'm just going to ask my timer how we're doing back there for time.
This goes till 12:30, right? It started at 11:30?
Yes, 11:30 we started.
You have till 12:30 if you'd like to take it.
Okay.
25 minutes.
We have a question down front first, and then we'll go to the lovely lady in the back.
Right, so what about contract testing?
Sorry?
And contract testing and contract testing tools?
Contract testing.
Contract.
Oh. I've seen it work and I've seen it not work. It's worked at times when you need to get that extra help. Contractors are really great. But I've also seen it where the contractors really truly didn't care. Right? So it really kind of boils down to your contractors. I've seen some contractors who just did, oh, you need test cases? Not a problem. They cranked out 100, 150 test cases that were garbage. I always say I'll take 5 great tests over 1,000 horrible ones any day. So it kind of really does depend on who you've chosen and how much you stay on top of them. Andy, what do you think?
Are we talking about hiring contractors or performing contract testing, like with
Oh.
APIs?
Then I apologize.
Okay, that's what
I was
happens.
very confused with
Me
your
too.
answer.
So I'm just going to sit over here and shut up. And just,
You good? No, you had a
was a
stroke
good
of
answer, though.
insight that was very good. It was just not on
the
top.
wrong. I'm used to having answers to the wrong questions.
It's okay. It was still good. We're among friends.
Gentlemen, do you have anything on that one?
No, sorry.
I can say things, but I want to yield. I've talked too much.
I didn't want to say it.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Let's listen. Yeah.
But yeah, Andy.
So contract, does everybody know what contract testing is, first of all? Yes, no? Okay. Yeah.
I don't think we have enough people.
Everybody knows what API testing is.
Yes.
What sucks about API testing? Sometimes you try to make the call and your environment is just screwed up, right? It doesn't make it. It's slow because of reasons. There's infrastructure, right? Most times it works, but yeah, sometimes it's because you make that network call out and you have to get the thing back. You have this black box dependency upon the services under test. And so what contract testing does is it says, hey, let's try to be a little bit smarter about how we approach this. What if we just remove that dependency? The thought is, well, we know we have a consumer and we have a provider. And so if we can just make sure that these two people can shake hands, that their requests and responses all kind of line up, meaning the consumer can get the right expected answer format and can provide the right kind of headers and query parameters and the things that go in the body. If we just make sure that that's all kind of aligned in format, then maybe we don't necessarily need to make the call out to real Z's and come back, right? And so what essentially contract testing does is it in a sense devolves your API testing, your integration, quote unquote, testing into more of like unit-like testing, because you don't need that extra dependency. You can test the consumer against a contract or the provider and vice versa. And if you have a good contract testing tool, then you can just kind of lift the veil and do the real thing when you want. The advantages of that is that you do remove that dependency. It'll be a lot faster in terms of execution time. You don't need to set up all the environments to get the things running in their environment so you can call it for real. The downsides are, in a lot of contract tests, they're not actually making sure that full path is good. They're just kind of saying, yeah, if I puke out things in a certain format, then I'm going to trust that it's okay. So you have a trust issue there. So you're taking a testing risk in order for different kinds of testing advantage.
I would say one thing with contract testing, and thank you, this makes the question much more clear now. What kind of contract we're talking about?
Yeah, if you could have just cut me off,
Yeah,
I would
exactly.
have appreciated that.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, one of the things with contract testing is that I find that for it to really work, you can't just throw up the contract and say, this is going to be good. There's still going to be two teams or two parties that are going to have to agree on this. And one of the keys of making this succeed is making sure that these two parties talk and discuss and ask questions about the contract. Well, what happens if we send in that? What happens then? What comes back, etc. If you don't do that, I think you might even put a barrier in between. That being said, I'm a huge proponent. I love contract testing, but that's only because it gives me an ability to, push people together and make them start communicating even more about, real stuff.
Yeah. And if I can add to that, it's oftentimes more than just two parties. Contract testing is very, very valuable when you have a large microservice mesh, because when you're just popping out little tiny services that do, maybe one or two things, but then you have like hundreds of these, maybe hundreds could be a lot. It exists out there. But even if you're only doing like a few dozens, it gets very, very hard to test all of those together from one central point of view. Rather, what the contracts do is say, hey, I'm going to put this out in this way, and as long as you can conform to this, we're going to shake hands and be okay. And so that can be a great way to try to scale that type of testing across a giant ecosystem.
I think one thing also that is easily missed here when we discuss about this, some people might be thinking, oh, well, these are just requirements you're talking about, right? But the thing with contract testing is that you can actually, implement the behavior. So if I'm, as party A is asking the contract for something, then we can actually, agree and implement the behavior of what's going to come back. It's not from the party B, but it's from the contract. And that allows us to set up this continuous integration and get this feedback on when we're breaking or updating the contract. So it's more than just written down requirements.
Cool. We have a question from the lovely lady in the back.
Hey, so can we talk a little bit about the vein of almost every test automation engineer is maintenance?
Oh, so the question is, can we talk a little bit about
Yeah, I'm a
test
contractor.
automation
I
and
don't
maintenance?
do maintenance. I'm in and out.
If you design, because I'm a big build it proponent, if you design it right, your maintenance should be minimal.
What about, you talked a little bit about migration and, from one to another. Is it ever appropriate, or when do you feel it's appropriate to say, like, everything delete test?
Absolutely. Hajer, do you have a?
Yeah.
I have an answer, but
So
I'd like to hear yours first.
I just taught test automation engineering via ISTQB, and that was the question. Maintenance, right? The problem with maintenance, I would say, if your solution from the get-go is not well built, you're planning for a disaster. I'll give you an example. I had I worked for a company. I started with, the architecture of the solution, and everything was going well until the customer started to ask for quicker releases. And it went from, we're fine, we're done. Okay, so maintenance is the biggest issue in automation. How to solve it? I would say you need to make sure that when you start, creating the solution, that should be your number one, how to deal with it and how to prevent it from being, the thing that's going to make you, completely fail. For my example, to give you my example, my experience, we went from, like I said, we were fine, and then we started skipping tests, skipping to the point where, okay, we'll get to it when we get a chance. We never get a chance. That's why I was asking, how do you get a chance to, okay, whenever we get a chance, we'll get back to it. You never get a chance, especially if you work in Agile, right? Things move fast, things are quick. And like I said, our customer asked us to really speed up the releases. So my advice would be, when we start creating the test automation architecture, you have to have a plan for that.
Yes,
Always.
you must keep maintenance in mind.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, to build off your answer, and it's a great one. Many years ago, I was heading up a team where we were developing a non-functional test automation framework for a big international telecommunication company. And one of the things that we did in this team, first of all, we made sure that we had a lot of autonomy. It's always up to the team to decide what can we ship now, when can we ship it, what's the best quality, etc. We can take input from others and adjust, but the team still needs autonomy. One of the things that we did, which I don't think I've seen that many times before, but for us it worked really great. We had a 0 bug policy. And that meant that any time a bug came in on our test framework, we fixed it. We didn't tell our test developers or developers to just willy-nilly drop everything. But if there was a bug reported, that was going to be fixed before anything else as soon as you had a chance. And this led to a bunch of different positive things, like our customers, our users, testers, started trusting the framework way, way more.
Yeah.
They also had a bigger understanding of, if I report a bug, then it will be fixed. So it was no longer almost seen as a negative. It was almost like a positive. And we did all kind of other stuff as well. People got points and gold stars if they reported bugs, and we highlighted them in demos. But this 0 bug policy, it may seem first that, that's expensive. But when you think about it, if you always continuously address the bugs first, then they're going to be fixed faster. You're going to know what code you've been poking around in, and you're building this trust with your users. So, Andy seemed to be wanting to jump in there.
Sure. So I want to build on this idea of maintenance and broaden it a little bit as well. In my experience, I've seen that most teams have a certain upper limit of capacity of the amount of tests or testing that they can do, right? If let's say you have a team starting off and they're automating new tests with every new sprint or something. And so there's this naive presumption that, well, every sprint we can have a linear velocity. And so every sprint we can pop out, say, maybe 25 tests. And it's just going to increase linearly like that over time. But in reality, there's only so much testing that a team can do and testing that a team can manage and maintain. And then also, not just that, but triage and report on, right, and investigate. And so just because time keeps going forward doesn't mean you can just keep adding the same amounts of tests continuously. I've seen it very hard where when, maybe there's a team of only 5 engineers, they may only be able to max out at a suite of, say, 300 tests or something, or maybe it's 500 tests. That capacity certainly is influenced by the choice and tools, the practices, the processes, and there are efficiencies that can be gained. But at some point you need to question when would you go and delete old tests? Because it's not just let's have 100% have all the tests in there. Maybe it's more of a question of which ones are the most valuable that we need to be running? Are there some that are still important but maybe less valuable that we just don't have capacity for anymore that need to kind of be sidelined a bit? That gets to that idea of maintenance as well.
One, oh,
Sorry. And I'm going to also tie it up to another issue, communication, right? Because as we've talked about the defects, when you find them, some of those defects may become, obsolete. You just don't need them because they're going to change. That feature is going to change. So having that prioritization of which ones to tackle first will help also with your maintenance, because okay, we need to focus on those ones that are going to be severe, high severity, high priority, and then making sure that the other ones, if they're going to change, why focusing on them? So having some kind of communication going on with your PO or whoever is going to be involved is going to be also very crucial to help you with your maintenance.
I think one interesting thought process or thought experiment would be, how in Kanban we have a WIP limit, work in progress limit. We simply can't work on too many stuff at once. It would be interesting to see long-term a team or organization adopt a test case limit when it comes to test automation, just like you said. So if you want to put in new automated test cases, well, you need to go over your old, boring test suite and say, all right, maybe time to rotate those test cases out, or maybe time to do that. Thought experiment. I don't know if it will work, but yeah.
I cringe at the thought of quotas on test cases because the number of test cases is a terrible metric.
It's
Yeah.
irrelevant.
I was throwing out numbers just to kind of make it real for people, not saying you should have this many. Oh my gosh. Yeah,
Every test case must earn its place in your test bed.
I would say that.
Every test case, whether it's 5 or 500, every test case must earn it there. But you should do regular pruning of your test cases.
Yes.
Because not all test case, while it earned it today, it may not need to be there in 6 months. Features
Correct.
change, your product changes, tools change
Yep.
that make some tests obsolete. So where I'm at, we do a regular health check of, do we still need to be doing all of these tests? We have a series of tests for hunt groups. Anybody who does telephony understands what a call center, a hunt group is. We hardly have any customers doing that now. So do we really need to be running those tests? Those are our most expensive ones. So should we be running them? Is it worth running them? These are things that we talk about a lot, and it helps with our maintenance cost.
Right.
Great question.
So I have a follow-up question on the maintenance.
Yep.
So for, I'm thinking where we work, we tag everything.
Yes.
So we tag all, that would mean we're running the whole kit.
Yep.
We would tag, other test cases are tagged as smoke tests. So those are constantly run every time we do a field check,
Right.
and we update our code. Is everybody on the panel following some sort of process like that?
So the question is about test case tagging and the ability to tag them and to be able to run subsets.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yes, definitely.
It's the only way I can get through all of mine.
I agree.
I don't have the resources to run all my tests on all my environments every night. So we literally have them tagged. I've got my smoke ones tagged, my sanity, my regression, all my phone systems are tagged, all my CRMs are tagged. And we're reaching the point now where we're getting into functionality. So we want to start being able to say, I want to be able to test, in my case, it's telephony. So any calls that transfer. So let's take all the tests that do transfers and put those together and that sort of thing. So, Andy?
Filtering test cases is awesome.
Yes.
You should do it. I've been in projects where they've done that as well, all the way down to basic features, so that it's like, hey, I'm changing this one particular thing regarding transactions. Boom, I can just filter, and based on tags for those, maybe it's only 23 tests. That's better than running all 2,300.
Absolutely.
It's wonderful.
Because, one of the things that we haven't talked about here, the reason why we have automation in place is not only so we can run a bit faster, it's also to give ourselves and our developers a sense of security,
Confidence,
knowing,
yes.
I can do this wild refactoring of this module here and my tests are gonna catch that. That being said, especially the developers, but even me as a test developer, I need that feedback fast. And I can't do that if I have the whole, big test suite running and I have to wait like 25 minutes on suppress to finish them. Hence
25
my
minutes, I
question
got
about
like-
playwright versus suppress. So you need to tag them, you need to split them up and be able to do that. So yes.
I would say I don't see how you can do it without it, actually, to be honest
That's
with
the
you.
best answer right there. We have time for one more question. You had yours. I'm sorry, ma'am. Oh, okay.
So how do you manage test maintenance when there are a lot of feature changes and there are A/B tests? And those feature changes are made. So what happens is you have a feature and then they introduce A/B tests. And now you have to maintain the existing tests so that they can manage both the end.
Called an if statement. It's an if statement. If it's that version, do this. If it's this version, do that.
It's always introducing.
Yes. Hajer, do you have anything on that one?
I'm going to think about it just a second.
Andy?
Branching can help.
Yes. Branching is a great way. So the question was, if you've got tests for a particular feature and then that feature is changing as you go along through time, how do you work with your test maintenance? I agree with Andy. We do a lot of branching. And in some cases, it's so minor, we'll actually put an if statement in going, if it's version 6, you're using this one. If it's version 7, you're using that one. Anything else before I wrap this up? Awesome. Well, I would like to thank this illustrious panel. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you all for being here. Enjoy the rest of your conference, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.